The sound of wood splintering jolted Piers Jameson from his first deep sleep in 3 nights, and before he could even register the gray light of dawn filtering through his broken shutters, rainwater splashed directly onto his face from the growing hole above his bed. He rolled sideways with a curse, landing hard on the rough wooden floor of his cottage as another crack echoed through the small space. His heart hammered as he scrambled to his feet, disoriented and already soaked, thinking for one wild moment that the roof was finally giving way entirely after weeks of worsening leaks. But then he heard it, distinct and deliberate, the rhythmic thud of a hammer striking wood. Someone was on his roof. Piers grabbed his shirt from where he had draped it over the chair the night before, yanking it over his head as he stumbled toward the door. His knee protested, the old injury from his soldiering days flaring with the sudden movement and the damp weather. He had been a scout in the King's border guard for 5 years before an ambush had left him with a shattered kneecap and an honorable discharge. The pension had been just enough to buy this run-down cottage and a few acres at the edge of civilized territory, far from the towns where his former comrades still served. Out here, he was alone. His nearest neighbor was half a day's ride away, which was exactly how he preferred it after everything he had seen during the war. The solitude meant safety, predictability, control over his small corner of the world, so who in blazes was hammering on his roof at sunrise? He threw open the door and stepped into the misty morning, rain immediately soaking through his shirt. The sky was the color of old pewter, heavy with clouds that had been dumping water on his property for the better part of a week. His vegetable garden was more mud than anything else now, and the small barn where he kept his chickens and his aging mare was listing slightly to one side. But his attention snapped upward to the steep slope of his cottage roof. A figure crouched there, balanced with impossible ease on the slick wooden shingles. Even through the rain and morning gloom, Piers could see the broad shoulders, the powerful frame, the distinctive green skin that marked her as unmistakably orcish. She wore simple traveling clothes, leather trousers and a sleeveless tunic that revealed muscular arms glistening with rainwater. Her black hair was pulled back in a thick braid, and as she turned to look down at him, he caught sight of small tusks protruding from her lower lip and pointed ears pressed flat against her skull. She had a hammer in one hand and what looked like a piece of scrap wood in the other. She had clearly been attempting to patch the worst of the holes. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Piers felt his hand drift instinctively toward his belt, where his knife would have hung during his guard days. He no longer wore it regularly, a fact he suddenly regretted. Orcs meant danger. That was what every soldier learned, what every frontier settler knew in their bones. The clans raided human settlements, burned crops, took livestock. They were the enemy, but this orc woman was alone and she was not attacking him. She was fixing his roof. She lifted one hand in a gesture that might have been a wave or simply acknowledgement of his presence. Then she called down to him, her voice carrying easily over the sound of the rain. "You have nails." The question was so unexpected, so utterly mundane, that Piers just stood there with his mouth open for several heartbeats. "Nails," she repeated, more insistently this time. She gestured at the patch of wood she had been trying to secure. "I found boards in your barn, but no nails. You have some." Piers finally found his voice. "Get off my roof." The orc woman tilted her head, studying him with an expression that suggested she was weighing her options. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably close to his own age of 26. Her eyes were a striking amber color, bright even in the gray morning light. "Your roof is broken," she said, speaking slowly as if to someone who might not understand. "Rain is getting inside. I am fixing it." I did not ask you to fix it. No, she agreed, but it needs fixing. And I need nails. She paused, then added with something that might have been humor, unless you prefer to sleep in a pond. Piers dragged a hand through his wet hair, trying to make sense of the situation. Every instinct told him to grab a weapon, to drive her away, to treat this as the threat it surely was. But she had not stolen anything. She had not hurt him. She was bizarrely attempting to repair his property. Why? He finally asked. The orc woman blinked down at him. Why what? Why are you fixing my roof? What do you want? She was quiet for a long moment, rain streaming down her face. Then she said simply, shelter. From the rain. I saw your barn last night. I slept there. This morning I saw the holes in your roof and thought. She trailed off, then shrugged. Fair trade. I fix roof. You do not shoot me for sleeping in your barn. So she had been here all night, close enough to kill him in his sleep if she had wanted to. The realization sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the rain, but she had not. She had just found a dry place to sleep and then, apparently, decided to do him a favor. Piers took a breath, then another. His knee was aching fiercely now, and the rain was cold enough to make his teeth chatter. Standing out here arguing with an orc about nails was possibly the strangest thing that had happened to him since leaving the guard. And that included the time he had accidentally gotten drunk with a traveling merchant who turned out to be a very poor illusionist. There are nails in the barn, he said finally, in a wooden box on the shelf by the door. The orc woman's face brightened immediately, a smile transforming her features from stern to almost beautiful. Good, I will get them. You should go inside, you are shaking. She moved with startling speed and grace, sliding down the roof slope and dropping to the ground with a light thud that should have been impossible for someone her size. Up close, she was tall, easily matching his own height of 6 feet, and the muscles in her arms and shoulders suggested a strength that could have snapped him in half without much effort. But she just nodded to him politely and jogged toward the barn, her braids swinging. Piers stood in the rain, watching her go, and wondered if he had lost his mind. By the time he had changed into dry clothes and managed to coax his small fireplace into producing some actual warmth, the hammering had resumed overhead. The rhythm was steady and competent, and to his surprise, the leak directly over his bed had stopped. He positioned his 2 buckets under the remaining drips and tried to think through what he should do. The sensible thing would be to wait for her to finish, thank her tersely, and send her on her way. Make it clear she was not welcome to stay. Orcs could not be trusted. That was just common sense. But it was still pouring rain outside and would be for days if the clouds were any indication. And she had fixed his roof, or was fixing it, and she had asked for so little in return. Piers had not spoken to another person in almost 2 weeks. The isolation was usually what he wanted, what he needed after the constant noise and presence of military life. But sometimes in the evenings, the silence felt less peaceful and more simply empty. He shook his head sharply. That was no reason to let an orc linger on his property, even a helpful one. The hammering stopped. He heard the sound of boots on the ground outside, then a polite knock at his door. When he opened it, she was standing there with rain dripping from her braid, holding out the box of nails. Finished, she announced. Your roof is patched. It will hold until you can replace the bad boards properly. Piers took the nail box automatically. Thank you, he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. You did not have to do that. I slept in your barn without asking, she replied with a shrug. It seemed fair. She glanced past him into the cottage, and he saw her eyes linger on the fire crackling in the hearth. She was soaked through, he realized, her clothes plastered to her skin. She had been out in the rain for over an hour working on his roof. He should close the door. wish her well and close the door. Instead, he heard himself say, "You want some tea, to warm up before you go." Her eyes snapped back to his face, widening slightly. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "You are offering me tea, you fixed my roof," Piers said. "Seems only fair." A slow smile spread across her face, and he noticed the way her tusks caught the light. "Yes," she said. "I would like tea very much." He stepped back to let her in, and she entered carefully, as if expecting a trap. She was too large for his small cottage, her presence filling the space in a way that made his heart beat faster. But she moved politely, staying near the door and not touching anything. Piers busied himself with the tea, grateful for something to do with his hands. He had a small collection of herbs he had gathered from the forest, and he mixed them in his battered kettle with water from the rain barrel. As he worked, he was acutely aware of her watching him. "I am called Kerra," she said finally, "of the Stonefist clan, or I was before they cast me out." He glanced at her sharply. "Cast you out? Why?" She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I refused to raid a human village. They were farmers, not soldiers, children and old ones. My clan said it did not matter, that humans are humans and all deserve death." Her voice went flat. "I said no, so they exiled me." Piers absorbed that, trying to reconcile it with everything he knew about orcs. That must have been hard. "It was necessary," Kerra said simply. "I could not kill children for being born human. Better to be alone than to be a monster." The kettle began to whistle, giving Piers an excuse to turn away. His hands were shaking slightly as he poured the tea into 2 wooden cups. He had spent 5 years fighting orcs, watching friends die in skirmishes and ambushes. He had been taught to see them as savage, brutal, incapable of mercy. But Kerra had been exiled for showing mercy. He handed her one of the cups, and she took it carefully, her large hands dwarfing the simple wood. She sipped it cautiously, then made a pleased sound. "This is good. What is the herb?" "Mostly mint with some chamomile and wild thyme," Piers said. "I am Piers Jameson. I was a scout in the King's border guard before." He gestured vaguely at his knee. "Before you were injured," Kerra finished. Her eyes went to his leg with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen combat. "You walk with pain. The damp weather makes it worse." "Yes," he admitted. There seemed little point in denying it. They drank their tea in silence for a while. The rain continued to drum on the roof, but it was a more peaceful sound now, without the counterpoint of water dripping inside. The cottage was warming, and Piers could see steam rising from Kerra's wet clothes as she stood near the fire. "Where will you go?" he asked finally. "After the rain stops," Kerra shrugged. "Further south, perhaps, away from clan territories. I have heard there are places humans and orcs sometimes trade peacefully." She did not sound particularly convinced. "That is just rumor," Piers said. "I have never seen such a place. Then I will keep walking until I do, or until I find somewhere empty enough that no one cares what I am." The bleakness in her voice struck something in him. He knew that feeling, the bone-deep weariness of trying to find a place in a world that seemed to have no room for you. It was why he had come out here to the frontier, after all. To be where no one would look at him and see a broken soldier, a man who could not serve any more. Before he could think better of it, he said, "You could stay in the barn until the rain clears, if you want." Kerra's head snapped up, her amber eyes wide. "You would let me stay?" Piers swallowed. What was he doing? This was foolish, dangerous, completely against all common sense, but the words kept coming anyway. "Just until the weather clears. The barn is dry now that you are not in the main house, and you did fix my roof." "I." Kerra set down her teacup carefully, as if afraid she might break it. "Yes. Yes, I would like that. Thank you, Piers Jameson." The way she said his full name, formal and careful, made something warm uncurl in his chest. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and they finished their tea without speaking. When Kerra finally left to return to the barn, Piers stood in the doorway and watched her jog through the rain. She looked back once before disappearing inside, raising one hand in farewell. He closed the door and leaned against it, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. The rain continued for 3 more days. During that time, Piers discovered that having Kerra on his property was nothing like what he had expected. She kept to herself mostly, sleeping in the barn and venturing out only to use the well or, occasionally, to hunt in the forest. She brought back rabbits twice, skinned and cleaned, and left them hanging by his door without a word. On the second day, he invited her in for another cup of tea, and she accepted with that same careful formality. They talked briefly about the weather, the state of the roads, neutral topics that required no vulnerability. But Piers found himself noticing small things. The way she cradled the warm teacup like it was precious, the slight softening of her expression when she looked at his fire, the careful way she moved to avoid tracking mud on his floor. On the third day, he woke to find that she had reinforced the sagging wall of his barn, using what looked like fallen branches from the forest and some of his spare rope. When he asked her about it, she just shrugged. "It needed fixing," she said, "and I have nothing else to do while it rains." So Piers invited her to help him with other tasks. His vegetable garden was drowning, and together they dug small trenches to channel the water away. It was hard work, made harder by the constant rain and the mud that sucked at their boots, but Kerra worked tirelessly, her strength making easy work of what would have taken him days alone. Afterward, they sat on his small porch, both covered in mud, and he found himself laughing at the absurdity of it all. An orc and a former soldier, digging drainage ditches together in a rainstorm. Kerra laughed too, a deep, genuine sound that transformed her face. "Your garden will survive now," she said, "though you need to thin the carrots when the soil dries. You know about gardening. My mother grew vegetables," Kerra said, "before she died. She taught me which plants need space and which grow well together." Her expression sobered. "That was before the clan moved to raiding full-time, when we still tried to live peacefully." Piers wanted to ask more, but something in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he said, "The carrots always confuse me. I can never tell which ones to pull." "I can show you," Kerra offered. "When it is dry enough." "I would like that." They sat in companionable silence, watching the rain. Piers realized he had not felt this comfortable with another person in a very long time. There was something about Kerra's presence that was soothing rather than draining. She did not expect him to be anything other than what he was. She did not ask about his past in the guard, did not probe at old wounds. She was just there, solid and steady as the rain. On the fourth day, the clouds finally began to break. Piers woke to sunlight streaming through his newly repaired roof. Not a single leak in sight. He dressed and went outside to find Kerra already awake, standing in the early morning light and tilting her face up toward the sun. She looked almost radiant, her green skin glowing, her expression peaceful. "It stopped," she said, turning to look at him. "The rain finally stopped." "Yes," Piers agreed and felt something heavy settle in his chest. Because the rain stopping meant Kerra would leave. That had been the agreement. She would stay until the weather cleared, and then she would continue on her way south. He should be relieved, getting back to his solitary life, his predictable routine. No complications, no risks. Instead, he felt an ache that had nothing to do with his knee. Kerra seemed to sense his thoughts. "I will gather my things," she said quietly. "I have taken enough of your hospitality." "You have more than earned it," Piers said. "My roof is fixed, my barn is reinforced, my garden is not underwater. I should be thanking you." Then we are even, Kerra said, but she did not move toward the barn. She stood there looking at him, and Piers could not read the expression in her amber eyes. He knew he should let her go. This was already far beyond anything sensible or safe. People would think he had lost his mind if they knew he had been harboring an orc on his property, sharing tea and conversation, working side by side in the rain. But he did not want her to go. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Somewhere in the last 4 days, he had stopped seeing Kerra as an orc, as something dangerous and other. She was just Kerra, who fixed things without being asked, who laughed at his bad jokes, who moved through the world with a quiet dignity that he found deeply compelling. "Stay," he heard himself say. Kerra went very still. "What, stay?" Piers repeated, his heart hammering. "Not just in the barn, I mean stay properly. There is a lot of work to do here getting ready for winter. I could use the help, and you need somewhere to be. You are asking me to stay." "Here with you." Her voice was carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Yes," Piers said simply. "If you want to." For a long moment, Kerra did not speak. Then she said very softly, "Why, you owe me nothing, and I am an orc. Your people hate my kind. If anyone knew you were sheltering me—" "No one comes out here," Piers interrupted. "That is why I chose this place, and as for owing you, that is not why I am asking." He took a breath, trying to find the right words. "You are good company, Kerra. I like having you here." "I have not felt this settled in a long time." Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motives. He met her gaze steadily, letting her see the truth of his words. Finally, slowly, she nodded. "Then yes," she said. "I will stay, for a while at least." The relief that flooded through him was almost dizzying. Piers found himself smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. "Good," he said. "That is good." Kerra smiled back, and the warmth in her expression made the morning feel suddenly brighter. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks that felt as natural as breathing. Kerra moved her few belongings from the barn to the small storage room attached to the cottage, which Piers helped her clear out and fit with a proper bed. It was not much, barely large enough for a sleeping pallet and a chest, but Kerra seemed genuinely pleased with it. "I have slept in mud and rain for months," she told him. "This is a palace." Together they worked to prepare the homestead for the coming winter. Kerra helped him harvest the vegetables that had survived the flooding, and true to her word, she showed him how to properly thin and care for the plants. Her knowledge of growing things was extensive, and Piers found himself learning more in a few days than he had figured out in months of trial and error. They repaired the fences around his small pasture, replaced rotting boards in the barn, and cut firewood from the forest. Kerra's strength made the work go quickly, but she was careful never to make Piers feel useless. She would take on the heaviest lifting without comment, but always asked his opinion on how things should be done, deferring to his knowledge of his own property. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Piers learned that Kerra was 24, that she had an older brother who had been killed in a raid 3 years ago, that her favorite food was roasted venison with wild mushrooms. She told him stories about her childhood in the clan, about the traditions and songs her mother had taught her before sickness took her. In turn, he told her about his years in the guard, carefully editing out the worst of the violence. He talked about his friend Marcus, who had died in the ambush that shattered his knee, about the crushing boredom of guard duty punctuated by moments of sheer terror, about the relief he had felt when the healers told him he would never fight again. "You were relieved?" Kerra asked, tilting her head. "Yes," Piers admitted. "I know I should not have been. It was supposed to be an honor serving the king, protecting the realm. But I was tired, Kerra. Tired of being afraid, tired of killing, tired of watching friends die. When they discharged me, it felt like being released from prison." Kerra was quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand that. The feeling of relief when you stop doing something that tears at your soul." She looked into the fire. "When my clan exiled me, part of me was glad, even though I had nowhere to go, even though I was alone. Because I did not have to pretend anymore that I believed in their cause." Piers reached out and touched her hand where it rested on her knee. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond the accidental brushing of fingers during work, and he felt her startle slightly. But she did not pull away. Instead, she turned her hand over and let his fingers settle against her palm. Her hand was warm and calloused, the skin rougher than his own. They sat like that for a long while, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to coals. Something was growing between them, Piers realized. Something that went beyond gratitude or simple companionship. He found himself watching Kerra when she was not looking, noticing the way the sunlight caught in her black hair, the grace of her movements despite her size, the rare beauty of her smile. And sometimes he caught her watching him too, but neither of them spoke of it. The unspoken understanding hung between them, fragile and precious, too new to put into words. The first frost came in late autumn, turning the world silver and hushed. Piers woke to find his breath misting in the cold air and immediately began stoking the fire. Kerra emerged from her small room wrapped in the thick blanket he had given her, her hair loose around her shoulders for once instead of in its usual braid. "It is freezing," she said, and he could hear the faint chatter of her teeth. "Winter comes early this far north," Piers said. "But we have enough firewood and food stored. We will be fine." They had been working toward this for weeks, smoking meat and pickling vegetables, gathering nuts and mushrooms from the forest, ensuring the barn was sealed against the cold. It felt strange to think in terms of we instead of I, but also deeply right. Kerra came to stand by the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. In the soft morning light, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Piers felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. "Have you ever seen snow?" he asked. Kerra shook her head. "My clan's territory was further south. We had cold but not snow." "You will see it soon enough," Piers promised. "When the real winter comes, this whole valley will be buried in it." He made them breakfast, porridge with dried berries and a precious bit of honey he had been saving. They ate sitting close together by the fire, the cold making the warmth of proximity more acceptable, even necessary. After breakfast, they went out to check on the animals. His chickens were huddled together in their coop, fluffed up against the cold, and his mare Rosie nickered a greeting when she saw them. Kerra had become fond of the old horse, often sneaking her treats and brushing her coat until it gleamed. As they worked, Piers noticed Kerra shivering despite her heavy clothes. Orcs were from warmer climates, he realized. She was not built for this kind of cold. That afternoon, he dug through his storage chest and found an old military coat, thick wool lined with fur. It had been part of his uniform that he had never gotten around to discarding. He brought it to Kerra where she was mending a harness in the barn. "Here," he said, holding it out. "This should help with the cold." Kerra looked at the coat, then at him, her expression unreadable. "This is a guard coat," she said quietly. "It was," Piers agreed, "but I have no use for it now, and you are freezing." Slowly, Kerra reached out and took the coat. She slipped it on, and though it was a bit small across her shoulders, it fit well enough. The deep blue fabric made her green skin seem to glow. "Thank you," she said, and there was something in her voice that made Piers think she was thanking him for more than just the coat. "You are welcome," he said softly. Their eyes met and held. Piers felt his pulse quicken, felt the pull of attraction that had been building for weeks now. Kerra took a small step toward him, then another, until they were standing close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. "Piers," she said, his name almost a question. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. Her skin was soft despite its roughness, warmer than he expected. She leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting half-closed. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Kerra breathed. "Yes, this is all right." He moved closer still, until their bodies were nearly touching, until he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. His heart was thundering so loud he was sure she could hear it. Kerra's hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his heart. "I did not think I would ever." She started, then stopped, shaking her head. "When my clan cast me out, I thought I would be alone forever, that no one would ever look at me and see anything but a monster." "You are not a monster," Piers said fiercely. "You are brave and kind and good. You are the best person I have met in a very long time." Her eyes went bright with unshed tears. "You are not what I thought humans were," she whispered. "You are gentle. You are safe." He kissed her then, leaning up slightly to bridge the small difference in their heights. Her lips were warm and soft, her tusks pressing gently against his mouth in a way that was strange but not unpleasant. She made a small sound of surprise, and then melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his back. The kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them learning the shape of each other. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Piers admitted. Kerra laughed, the sound shaky but joyful. "I thought I was imagining that you might feel the same way." "You were not imagining it." They kissed again, and this time there was more confidence, more heat. Piers lost himself in the feeling of her, the strength of her body against his, the way she held him as if he was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Kerra rested her forehead against his. "This is forbidden," she said quietly. "Humans and orcs do not. We are not supposed to." "I know," Piers said. "I do not care. If anyone found out, no one will find out. We are alone here, Kerra, just us. And that is how I want it." She pulled back to look at him searchingly. "You are certain? Because I am falling in love with you, Piers Jameson, and I need to know if I should guard my heart." The confession took his breath away. "Do not guard your heart," he said. "I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been since you fixed my roof and asked for nails." Kerra's smile was radiant, brighter than the sun. She kissed him again, hard and fierce, and he returned it with equal passion. They stayed in the barn for a long time, holding each other, stealing kisses, learning how to fit together. Outside, the first snow began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the world in white. Winter settled over the homestead like a thick blanket, and Piers had never been happier. He and Kerra were inseparable now, working together during the day and curling up together by the fire at night. She still slept in her own room, some vestige of propriety holding firm, but they spent every evening talking and kissing until the fire burned low. The snow fell frequently, piling up in drifts that made travel impossible. Piers was deeply grateful for this, as it meant no one would visit his homestead until spring. He and Kerra existed in their own private world, free from judgment or interference. They told each other everything. Kerra described the pain of watching her clan descend into mindless violence, of trying and failing to make them see reason. Piers talked about the nightmares he still had sometimes, about the faces of the orcs he had killed during his service. "I am sorry," Kerra said when he told her this. "I am sorry my people hurt you." "And I am sorry mine hurt you," Piers replied. "But we are not our people, Kerra, we are just ourselves. And that is enough." She kissed him then, gentle and sweet, and he felt something in his chest ease. They could not change the past, could not undo the harm their respective peoples had done to each other. But they could choose something different. here in their small corner of the world. The days fell into a peaceful routine. They would wake and tend the animals, then work on whatever projects needed doing. Piers taught Kerra to read and write, something her clan had never bothered with. She was a quick study, her clever mind picking up the letters and sounds with ease. In turn, she taught him some of the orcish language, the guttural sounds that felt strange in his mouth but became beautiful when she spoke them. One evening, as they sat by the fire with Kerra's head resting on his shoulder, Piers said, "When spring comes, we should plant an orchard." Kerra lifted her head to look at him. An orchard, yes. Apple trees, maybe some pear and plum. It would take a few years before they produced fruit, but... He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "But you are planning for years from now," Kerra finished softly. "You are planning for me to still be here." "If you want to be," Piers said quickly. "I am not trying to trap you or..." Kerra silenced him with a kiss. "I want to be here," she said against his lips. "I want to plant an orchard with you and watch it grow. I want to stay, Piers. For as long as you will have me." "Forever, then," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want you here forever." She kissed him again, deeper this time, and he tangled his hands in her hair. They had been careful with each other until now, both aware of the newness of what they had, both afraid of moving too fast. But Piers could feel the restraint fraying, could feel the heat building between them. "Kerra," he said, pulling back slightly. I mean if you want." She smiled, understanding in her eyes. "I want," she said simply. "But not tonight, soon, but not tonight. I want to be certain this is real, that it will last. Can you be patient with me?" "I can be patient," Piers promised, though his body was screaming otherwise. "Take all the time you need." She curled back against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall outside the window. Piers felt a contentment so deep it was almost frightening. He had never imagined he could be this happy, this complete. But the universe, it seemed, was not content to let them keep their peace. The trouble came on a bright, bitter day in the heart of winter. Piers was in the barn, tending to Rosie, when he heard the sound of voices outside. Male voices, rough and unfamiliar. His blood went cold. No one should be traveling in this weather. No one should know he was here. He moved to the barn door and looked out carefully. 3 men on horseback were approaching the cottage, their horses struggling through the deep snow. They wore the leather armor of border guards, and Piers recognized the insignia of the unit he had once served with. Panic surged through him. Kerra was inside the cottage. If they saw her, if they found her here. He stepped out of the barn, forcing himself to walk normally despite his racing heart and the protests of his bad knee in the cold. "Can I help you?" he called out, injecting confusion and curiosity into his voice. The lead rider, a man Piers did not recognize, pulled his horse to a halt. "Piers Jameson." "That is me," Piers confirmed. "What brings the guard out here in the middle of winter? We are tracking an orc," the man said bluntly. "A female, traveling alone. Someone reported seeing her heading in this direction a few months back. Have you seen any sign of her?" Piers felt his mouth go dry. "An orc? No, I have not seen anything like that. What would an orc be doing out here alone?" "That is what we aim to find out," another guard said. He was younger, barely more than a boy, his face red from the cold. "There have been reports of raids further south. Could be she is a scout. Or could be she is just passing through," the lead guard said. "Either way, we need to find her. Mind if we search your property?" Every instinct screamed at Piers to refuse to send them away. But that would only make them suspicious. "Of course," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Though I am not sure what you expect to find. It is just me and my animals out here." The guards dismounted, tying their horses to the fence. Piers's mind raced. Kerra's room was off the main cottage, but her things would be visible if anyone looked closely. The extra bed, her clothes, the small carvings she had been making in the evenings. He had to warn her. "Let me just check my chickens are secured," Piers said, starting toward the cottage. "They are skittish around strangers." "We will start with the barn," the lead guard said. "Holler if you need anything." Piers nodded and walked as quickly as his knee would allow toward the cottage. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might burst. He opened the door and found Kerra standing in the center of the main room, her eyes wide. "I heard," she whispered. "Guards, looking for me." "You need to hide," Piers said urgently, closing the door behind him. "Now, where? They will search everywhere." Piers thought frantically. She was right. The cottage was small with few hiding places, and even if she hid they would find her things, ask questions. But if she ran, they would see her tracks in the snow, hunt her down. "We need to make it look like you were never here," he said, already moving toward her room. "Help me." They worked with desperate speed, gathering her few possessions and stuffing them into a pack. Piers threw the pack into his own room, shoving it under his bed. The extra pallet was harder to conceal, but they managed to lean it against the wall in the storage room and pile boxes in front of it. "The well," Kerra said suddenly. "There is a space beneath the stone cover. I saw it when we repaired the rope. I can fit there." It was a terrible plan. The well was freezing, and the space she meant was barely large enough for a person, but it was the only option they had. "Go," Piers said. "Quickly, I will lead them away from there if I can." Kerra grabbed his face and kissed him hard. "If they find me, do not defend me," she said fiercely. "Promise me. I will not have you hurt for my sake." "I promise nothing," Piers said. "Now go." She ran, slipping out the back door and disappearing into the snow. Piers took a shaky breath, trying to compose himself. He smoothed his hair, checked that nothing looked out of place, and stepped back outside. The guards were emerging from the barn, shaking their heads. "Nothing in there," the lead guard reported. "Just an old horse and some chickens." "Told you," Piers said, hoping his voice sounded calm. "I have not seen any orcs. If one came through here, I would have reported it." "Can we check the cottage?" the younger guard asked. "Just to be thorough." Piers gestured toward the door, his stomach nodding. "Help yourself. It is just one room and a storage area. Not much to see." They went inside, and Piers followed, watching as they looked around his humble home. The lead guard poked at the fireplace, checked behind the door, opened the storage room. Piers held his breath when the man's eyes swept over the pile of boxes concealing the pallet, but he did not investigate further. "Looks clear," the guard said finally. "You live out here alone, Jameson?" "Yes," Piers said. "Quieter that way." "Do not you get lonely?" "Sometimes," Piers admitted, which was not entirely a lie, "but I prefer it to the alternative." The guard nodded, seeming to accept this. They trooped back outside, and Piers felt a fraction of his tension ease. They had not found her. Maybe they would just leave now. But then the youngest guard said, "Should we check the well? Could be tracks around it." Piers's heart stopped. "The well is frozen," he said quickly. "No one has used it in weeks. We are getting water from the stream." "Still," the lead guard said, already walking toward it. "Better to be thorough." Piers followed, his mind blank with panic. What could he do? If they lifted the cover, they would see Kerra immediately, and then everything would be over. The guard reached the well and brushed snow off the wooden cover. Piers saw his hand go to the edge, ready to lift it. "Wait," Piers said desperately. "I think I saw something in the forest this morning. Could have been tracks." The guard paused, looking at him. "What kind of tracks?" "Large," Piers said, improvising frantically. "Leading east toward the mountains. I thought it was a bear, but it could have been an orc," the guard finished. He looked at his companions. "We should check it out. If she is heading for the mountains, we need to catch her before the next snowfall." "What about the well?" the young guard asked. The well is frozen solid, like he said, the lead guard replied. Come on, show us these tracks, Jameson. Piers led them toward the tree line, his knee screaming in protest as he forged through the deep snow. He made a show of looking around, pointing vaguely at marks that could have been anything. The guards spread out, searching, and Piers prayed they would not realize he was lying. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the lead guard called them back. Too much fresh snow, he said. Can't tell what made those marks. Could be anything. Should we keep searching? The young guard asked. No point, the lead guard said. If the orc was here, she is long gone now. We will report that the trail went cold in this area and recommend increased patrols come spring. He looked at Piers. If you see anything unusual, you report it immediately. Understood. Understood, Piers said, nodding. The guards mounted their horses and rode away, their forms disappearing into the white landscape. Piers stood watching until he could no longer see them, then turned and ran as best he could back to the well. He threw the cover open and looked down. Kerra was there, wedged into the narrow space beneath the rim, her lips blue from the cold and her whole body shaking. They are gone, Piers said, reaching down. Come on, give me your hand. It took both of them working together to get her out. She was so cold she could barely move, her fingers numb and clumsy. Piers half carried her to the cottage and sat her by the fire, wrapping every blanket he owned around her shaking form. Stupid, she chattered through frozen lips. So stupid. I should have run. They would have tracked you, Piers said, adding more wood to the fire. This was the only way. He made hot tea and held the cup to her lips, making her drink even when she protested. Gradually, color returned to her face and the violent shaking subsided into occasional tremors. They were looking for me, she said quietly. All this time I thought I was safe, that no one cared about one exiled orc, but they are hunting me. They are hunting a rumor, Piers corrected. They do not know you are here, they do not know about us. But what if they come back? What if someone else comes? Piers sat beside her and pulled her into his arms, blankets and all. Then we will deal with it, he said. Together. I am not letting you go, Kerra, not for them, not for anyone. She buried her face in his chest and he felt wetness that might have been tears. I am so afraid, she whispered. I am afraid they will take this away, take you away. They will not, Piers promised fiercely. I will not let them. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other until Kerra finally stopped shaking. When she pulled back to look at him, her eyes were red but determined. I love you, she said. I need you to know that. Whatever happens, I love you. I love you too, Piers said and kissed her gently. And nothing is going to happen. We are safe here, together. But even as he said it, he knew their peace had been shattered. The outside world had found them, and it was only a matter of time before it came crashing in again. The close call with the guards changed something between them. In the days that followed, Kerra and Piers clung to each other with a new urgency, as if trying to hold on to something they knew might slip away. They were more careful now, Kerra staying out of sight during the day, both of them constantly watching for any sign of visitors. But they were also more open with their feelings. The fear of losing each other had burned away the last of their reservations, and they spoke freely now of their love, their hopes, their fears. One night, as they lay tangled together by the fire, Kerra said, If we had met in a different world, do you think it would have been easier? Maybe, Piers said, running his fingers through her unbound hair. But I do not know if I would have appreciated you the same way. Out here, away from everything else, I can see you clearly. Just you, not what the world says you should be. I wish we could stay like this forever, Kerra murmured. Just us in our little cottage with no one to tell us we are wrong. We can, Piers said, as long as we are careful. But Kerra shook her head. Winter will end, spring will come, and with spring, travelers, merchants, settlers, maybe more guards, someone will see me eventually. She was right, and Piers knew it. Their isolation was temporary, a gift of the harsh winter. When the snow melted and the roads cleared, the world would come knocking. Then we leave, Piers said suddenly. We pack up and head further north into the real wilderness, somewhere no one will ever find us. Kerra lifted her head to look at him. You would do that, leave your home. This cottage is not my home, Piers said. You are. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. You mean that? I have never meant anything more. She kissed him then, deep and desperate, and Piers felt the last of his control snap. His hands found the hem of her shirt and she helped him pull it over her head, revealing the green expanse of her skin, the strong lines of her body. Are you certain? He asked, his voice rough. You said you wanted to wait. I am certain, Kerra said. I do not want to wait any more. I want you, Piers. All of you. They made love there by the firelight, learning each other's bodies with gentle care and growing passion. Kerra's skin was warm beneath his hands, her strength tempered with surprising softness. She touched him like he was something precious, something to be treasured, and he tried to do the same for her. Afterward, they lay wrapped in blankets, their bodies pressed close, and Piers felt a peace so profound it almost hurt. No matter what happens, he said into the darkness, I want you to know that this right here is the happiest I have ever been. Kerra's arms tightened around him. For me too, she whispered. For me too. They slept like that, safe in each other's arms, while outside the winter wind howled and the snow continued to fall. The rest of winter passed in a blur of quiet domesticity and deepening love. Piers and Kerra made plans for their future, mapping routes north into the unsettled wilderness, calculating supplies they would need. But they also lived in the present, savoring every moment together. They cooked meals side by side, repaired tools and equipment, told each other stories, made love by the fire. Piers taught Kerra to play the simple wooden flute he had carved years ago, and she taught him orcish songs that had been passed down through generations. Their differences, once a source of potential conflict, became something to celebrate and explore. As winter began to loosen its grip, and the first signs of spring appeared, they started preparing in earnest for their departure. They gathered supplies, dried meat and vegetables, sorted through their belongings to determine what was essential and what could be left behind. It was bittersweet for Piers. This cottage had been his refuge, his safe haven after the trauma of war. But Kerra was right that they could not stay. Eventually, someone would discover her, and then everything would fall apart. Better to leave on their own terms, to find somewhere they could truly be free. They decided to leave as soon as the worst of the mud season passed, when the roads would be dry enough for travel, but before the main wave of spring traffic began. But 3 days before their planned departure, fate intervened. Piers was in the forest, checking the snares they had set for rabbits, when he heard shouting from the direction of the cottage. His blood ran cold. He ran as fast as his bad knee would allow, branches whipping at his face, his heart hammering with fear. He burst out of the tree line to see a scene from his nightmares. 5 orcs stood in his yard, huge and heavily armed, and they had Kerra surrounded. She stood with her back to the cottage wall, a wood axe in her hands, facing them down with fierce determination. I will not go back, she was saying, her voice loud and clear. You exiled me. I am no longer of the Stonefist clan. You are no longer of any clan, the largest orc snarled. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall with ritual scars covering his arms. You are a disgrace. Living with a human, lying with him like some kind of animal. Piers felt rage surge through him, hot and overwhelming. These were her former clan members. They had come to punish her for the crime of loving him. "Get away from her," he shouted, stumbling forward. He had no weapon except the small knife at his belt, but he did not care. He would fight them with his bare hands if he had to. The big orc turned to look at him, and his expression twisted into something ugly. "The human pet," he sneered. "So it is true. Our Kerra has been spreading her legs for this weak creature." "Do not speak of him that way," Kerra snarled, her grip tightening on the axe. "We came to give you a chance," another orc said. This one was older, with gray shot through his black hair. "Come back to the clan. Reject this human. There is still time to redeem yourself." "I do not want redemption," Kerra said. "Not if it means giving up Piers, not if it means becoming like you." The big orc spat on the ground. "Then you will die as you lived, without honor." He moved, faster than something his size should have been able to, lunging for Kerra with a blade that gleamed wickedly in the pale sunlight. Kerra swung the axe to block, but the blow sent her staggering backward. Piers ran forward, throwing himself at the big orc. It was suicide, he knew that, but he could not stand by and watch Kerra be killed. His momentum carried them both to the ground, and Piers managed to get his knife out and slash at the orc's arm. The orc roared in pain and backhanded Piers across the face. Stars exploded in his vision, and he felt himself flying through the air. He hit the ground hard, his bad knee screaming in agony through blurred vision. He saw Kerra screaming his name. She threw herself at the big orc with wild fury, her axe moving in deadly arcs. But there were too many of them, and they were too strong. One of the other orcs grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. Piers tried to get up, but his knee gave out. He fell back down, helpless, watching as they overpowered her. "Enough!" A new voice rang out. Everyone froze. An old orc woman stepped out from the forest, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. She was small for an orc, bent with age, but there was something about her that commanded instant respect. The other orcs immediately lowered their weapons. "Grandmother," the big orc said, surprise evident in his voice. "We did not know you were here." "Clearly," the old woman said dryly. She walked forward, her keen eyes taking in the scene. "You were about to kill one of your own for the crime of choosing love over hatred." "She has betrayed the clan," the gray-haired orc protested. "She has shown more wisdom than any of you," the old woman snapped. She looked at Kerra, who was still being held by two of the orcs. "Let her go." They released Kerra immediately, and she ran to Piers, dropping to her knees beside him. "Are you hurt?" she asked urgently, her hands gentle as they checked him for injuries. "I am fine," Piers lied, though his face was throbbing and his knee felt like it was on fire. "Are you?" "I am well," Kerra said, but her eyes were full of fear. The old woman approached them slowly, studying them both. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "I am Grandmother Kerra, elder of the Stonefist clan, and you must be Piers Jameson." "How do you know my name?" Piers asked. "Because I have been watching you both for 2 weeks, Kerra said. "Ever since I heard rumors that my granddaughter was living with a human." Kerra's head snapped up. "You are my grandmother, your father's mother, yes," Kerra confirmed. "I had thought you dead, child. When the clan exiled you, I assumed you would not survive the winter alone." "She did not survive alone," Piers said, finding his voice despite the pain. "She found me. We found each other." Kerra's eyes, still sharp despite her age, studied him carefully. "And do you love her, human? Or is she just a novelty to you?" "I love her more than anything in this world," Piers said without hesitation. "I would die for her." "He nearly did," Kerra said quietly. "Just now. He attacked Braca to protect me, even though he had no chance of winning." Braca, the big orc, looked uncomfortable at this. Kerra nodded slowly. "And you, Kerra, what do you feel for this man?" "I love him," Kerra said simply. He is my home, my heart, everything I want in this world." The old woman was quiet for a long moment, then she turned to the other orcs. "You will leave," she said. "All of you. You will return to the clan and tell them that Kerra is under my protection. Anyone who wishes to challenge that can come and speak with me directly." "But grandmother," Braca protested, "she has broken every law, every traditions that are leading our people to extinction." Kerra snapped. "We have been at war with the humans for 3 generations, and what has it brought us? Death, exile, constant running. Kerra and Piers have found another way. Perhaps it is time we learned from them instead of punishing them." The orcs looked at each other, clearly uncertain. But none of them dared to argue further with the old woman. One by one, they bowed and melted back into the forest. When they were gone, Kerra sat down heavily on a nearby stump. "That was exhausting," she muttered. "I am too old for dramatic confrontations." Kerra still looked stunned. "You are truly my grandmother, but I thought. Father said you died years ago." "I let people believe that," Kerra said. "It was easier than watching the clan descend into madness. I have been living alone in the deep forest, avoiding everyone." She smiled slightly. "But then I heard about you, about the orc woman living peacefully with a human, and I had to see for myself." "You have been watching us?" Piers asked, feeling slightly violated. "Only from a distance," Kerra assured him. "I wanted to see if it was real, if you truly cared for each other. And I must say I am impressed. You have built something good here." "We are leaving," Kerra said. "We were going to head north in a few days, find somewhere remote where no one would bother us." Kerra nodded thoughtfully. "That might be wise. The clan will not trouble you while I live, but I am old, after I am gone." She shrugged. "But I did not come here to tell you to run. I came to offer you another option." "What kind of option?" Piers asked warily. "There is a valley," Kerra said. 3 weeks' journey from here, deep in the mountains. It is neutral territory, claimed by neither humans nor orcs. A few exiles have settled there over the years. Humans who did not fit in their world, orcs who were cast out of their clans. They live together in peace, trading, helping each other." Kerra and Piers looked at each other, hope sparking between them. "Others like us?" Kerra asked. "Others who chose love over hatred, yes," Kerra confirmed. "It is not a large settlement, perhaps 30 people all told, but they have built something good, something worth protecting." "Why are you telling us this?" Piers asked. Kerra smiled, and for the first time, Piers could see the resemblance between her and Kerra. "Because you remind me of my husband. He was human, you know. We loved each other for 40 years before he died. It was a different time then, easier to hide such things, but we were happy." "You loved a human," Kerra breathed. "I did," Kerra said softly. "So I understand what you have found, and I want you to have the chance we had to live your love openly without fear." She stood up, wincing slightly. "Think about the valley. If you decide to go, I will draw you a map. If you decide to run north instead, I will respect that too." She started to walk away, then paused and looked back. "For what it is worth, I think you would be happy there. And the settlement could use a good builder and a skilled gardener." Then she was gone, disappearing into the forest as silently as she had appeared. Piers and Kerra sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, Kerra said, "Did that really just happen?" "I think so," Piers said. "Unless we are both having the same very strange dream." Kerra laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. Then she helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they made their way into the cottage. She settled him by the fire and checked him over more carefully, prodding gently at the bruise blooming on his cheek. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice shaking. "You should have stayed back, should have let me handle it, and watched them hurt you." Piers caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "Never. I told you I would die for you, Kerra. I meant it." "I do not want you to die for me," she said fiercely. I want you to live with me, for a very long time in a place where we can be happy and safe. This valley, Piers said thoughtfully. Do you think it is real, or is it too good to be true? I do not know, Kerra admitted. But grandmother Kerra seemed sincere, and she said she loved a human. If that is true, then maybe. She trailed off, hope and fear warring in her expression. Maybe there really is a place for us, Piers finished. A real community where we would not have to hide. They talked long into the night, weighing their options. The valley was appealing, the promise of others like them almost impossibly tempting. But it was also a risk. What if Kerra was wrong? What if the settlement was not as welcoming as she believed in the end? Kerra said. I think we should at least look. If the valley is as she described, it could be everything we want. And if it is not, we can always continue north. Piers agreed. The next morning, they found a folded piece of bark tucked into the door frame, marked with a detailed map and instructions in surprisingly neat handwriting. At the bottom, Kerra had written, "May you find the peace you deserve." They spent the next 2 days packing and preparing. This time, they were not just running away, they were moving towards something. The difference felt monumental. On their last morning at the cottage, Piers stood in the doorway and looked around at the place that had been his refuge and the site of his greatest happiness. So much had changed since that rainy morning when Kerra had climbed onto his roof and asked for nails. "Are you sad to leave?" Kerra asked, coming to stand beside him. "A little," Piers admitted. "This place gave me shelter when I needed it, but it is just a building, Kerra. You are my home now." She leaned down and kissed him gently. "And you are mine." They loaded their supplies onto Rosie's back, the old mare patient as always, and set out. The journey would be long and difficult, 3 weeks through mountain passes that were still clogged with snow. But they faced it together, hand in hand, ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey to the valley tested them in ways they had not anticipated. The mountain passes were treacherous, narrow paths with sheer drops on one side and walls of stone on the other. Snow still lingered in the heights, and they had to wade through drifts that sometimes came up to their thighs. Rosie struggled with the terrain, and they often had to lead her carefully around the worst of it. Food was scarce. They rationed carefully, supplementing their supplies with whatever Kerra could hunt or forage, but there were days when they went to bed with stomachs growling. Piers's knee ached constantly in the cold, and there were nights when he could barely walk. But through it all, they had each other. When Piers struggled with the steep climbs, Kerra would support him, her strength making up for his injury. When Kerra grew discouraged, doubting whether the valley was real or just a cruel hope, Piers would remind her of all they had already overcome. They took turns keeping watch at night, curled together for warmth in their shared bedroll. On the 10th day, they encountered their first obstacle that was not weather or terrain. They were resting by a small stream when 3 men emerged from the rocks above them. They were rough-looking, armed with rusty swords and bows, clearly bandits looking for easy prey. "Well, well," the leader said, eyeing their packs. "What do we have here?" "Travelers with supplies. How convenient." Piers stood slowly, putting himself between the bandits and Kerra. "We do not want trouble. We are just passing through." "That is too bad," the bandit said, "because we want your food, your horse, and whatever coins you are carrying." Kerra rose beside Piers, and the bandits noticed her for the first time. Their eyes widened as they took in her green skin, her tusks, her obvious orcish heritage. "Gods above," one of them breathed. "That is an orc." "Sharp eyes," Kerra said dryly. The leader recovered quickly, his expression hardening. "I do not care what she is. Hand over your goods or we will take them by force." "I would reconsider that," Kerra said calmly. She picked up the staff she had been using as a walking stick, and in her hands it suddenly looked a lot more like a weapon. The bandits laughed. 3 against 2, I like those odds. What followed was brief and brutal. Kerra moved like lightning, her staff cracking against skulls and knees with devastating precision. Piers managed to trip one bandit and disarm him, though his bad knee nearly gave out in the process. Within minutes, all 3 bandits were on the ground, groaning. "I suggest you find a new profession," Kerra said pleasantly, standing over them with her staff. "Banditry does not seem to suit you." The bandits fled as soon as they could stand, leaving their weapons behind. Kerra and Piers collapsed in relieved laughter. Did you see the look on their faces? Piers gasped. They had no idea what hit them. "You were quite good yourself," Kerra said, kissing the top of his head. "That trip was perfectly timed." They continued on, their spirits lifted by the small victory. The mountains gradually began to level out, and the air grew warmer as they descended. According to Kerra's map, they were getting close. On the 18th day, as the sun was setting, they crested a ridge and looked down into a wide, green valley. It was beautiful, a patchwork of fields and forest with a river running through the center. And there, clustered near the river, were buildings. Houses, barns, what looked like a communal hall. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from this distance they could see people moving about. "It is real," Kerra breathed. "It is actually real." They made their way down into the valley as twilight fell. As they approached the settlement, people began to notice them. A woman emerged from one of the houses, human with silver-shot hair, her expression curious but not hostile. "Travelers." She called out. "We are looking for sanctuary," Piers called back. "We were told this was a place where humans and orcs could live in peace." The woman smiled. "It is. I am Mara. Come, you both look exhausted. Let us get you fed and settled, and you can tell us your story." As they entered the settlement, more people came out to greet them. Piers saw humans and orcs standing side by side, interacting with easy familiarity. He saw a human man with his arm around an orc woman's waist, saw orc and human children playing together. It was like stepping into a dream. Mara led them to the communal hall, where a fire was burning and the smell of cooking food made Piers's mouth water. They were given seats at a long table, and people gathered around, curious and welcoming. "How did you find us?" an older orc man asked. "Grandmother Kerra drew us a map," Kerra said. "She is my grandmother, and she told us about this place." "Kerra," Mara exclaimed. "We have not seen her in years. How is she?" "Still formidable," Kerra said with a smile. They told their story, leaving nothing out. The cottage, the roof that needed fixing, the slow building of love, the threats from guards and clan members, Kerra's intervention. The people listened with rapt attention, nodding at familiar beats, smiling at the tender moments. When they finished, Mara reached across the table and took both their hands. "Welcome home," she said simply. "We have all walked similar paths to get here. You are safe now, both of you." Kerra's eyes filled with tears, and Piers felt his own throat tighten. They had found it. A real home, a place where they could be themselves without fear or hiding. That night they were given a small cottage on the edge of the settlement, simple but sturdy. As they lay in the unfamiliar bed, exhausted but happy, Kerra curled against Piers and whispered, "Is this real? Or am I going to wake up and find it was all a dream?" "It is real," Piers promised, kissing her forehead. "We made it. We are home." They fell asleep in each other's arms, safe and loved, ready to begin their new life. The valley settlement, they soon learned, was called Haven, and it lived up to its name. Over the following weeks, Piers and Kerra integrated into the community with surprising ease. The other settlers welcomed them warmly, sharing knowledge and resources without hesitation. There were about 40 people in total, an almost even mix of humans and orcs, most of whom had found each other in unlikely circumstances. and chosen love over the hatred their respective peoples preached. Piers put his carpentry skills to use, helping repair and expand the existing buildings. His bad knees still troubled him, but the community was understanding, and there were always people willing to help with the heavier lifting. He found particular kinship with a human man named Paul, who had also been a soldier before deserting to be with his orc partner. Kerra threw herself into the gardens, which were extensive and expertly planned. She worked alongside a human woman named Catherine who had studied agriculture, and an older orc named Grak, who knew which wild plants were edible. Together, they planned the spring planting, discussing crop rotation and companion planting with the kind of enthusiasm that made Piers smile. But what surprised them most was how normal everything felt. Here, an orc and a human holding hands was unremarkable. Mixed couples were the majority, not the scandalous exception. Children of both races played together without thought to differences in skin color or the presence of tusks. One evening, about a month after their arrival, the settlement gathered for a communal meal. It was a tradition, Mara explained, held every week to strengthen bonds and share news. The food was simple but plentiful, everyone contributing what they could. Piers sat with Kerra on one side and Paul on the other, watching the easy interaction around them. An orc woman was teaching a human child to braid her hair. Two human men were arm wrestling with an orc who was clearly letting them think they had a chance. Laughter and conversation filled the air. "It is something, is not it?" Paul said, following Piers's gaze. "I still sometimes cannot believe it is real." "How long have you been here?" Piers asked. 3 years, Paul said. "My partner Zara and I found this place after fleeing her clan. Best decision we ever made." He paused, then added, "Mara is planning a bonding ceremony next month. For couples who want to make their commitment official, you and Kerra should consider it." Piers felt his heart skip. A bonding ceremony, like a marriage, but one that recognized and celebrated unions between different races. "I would like that," he said quietly. That night, as he and Kerra walked back to their cottage under a sky full of stars, Piers raised the subject. "Paul mentioned a bonding ceremony," he said, trying to sound casual, "for couples who want to formalize their commitment." Kerra stopped walking and looked at him, her amber eyes bright in the moonlight. "Are you asking me to bond with you, Piers Jameson?" "I suppose I am," Piers said, his heart racing. "I know we have not been here long and maybe it is too soon, but I love you. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." Kerra's smile was radiant. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will bond with you. I would be honored." She kissed him there under the stars, and Piers felt a happiness so complete it almost frightened him. After everything they had been through, all the hardship and fear, they had found this. Safety, community, love. The next month passed in a blur of preparation. The bonding ceremony, Mara explained, was a combination of human and orcish traditions. There would be vows, rings if the couple wanted them, and a celebration with the whole community. Kerra and Piers would not be the only couple bonding. 3 other pairs had also chosen to participate. Kerra worked with Catherine to make her bonding dress, a beautiful creation of green fabric that complemented her skin tone. Piers borrowed a formal shirt from Paul and spent hours polishing his old boots until they gleamed. They had no family to invite, but the entire settlement felt like family now. The ceremony was held on a warm spring evening in a meadow just outside the settlement. Flowers bloomed everywhere, and someone had strung lanterns in the trees, casting a soft golden light over everything. Piers stood at the front with the other humans being bonded, his heart hammering as he waited. And then Kerra appeared, walking toward him with her grandmother Kerra at her side. The old orc had arrived 2 days earlier, announcing that she would not miss her granddaughter's bonding for anything. She beamed with pride as she walked Kerra forward and placed her hand in Piers's. "Take care of her," Kerra whispered to Piers, "or I will come back and haunt you." "I will," Piers promised. Mara officiated, speaking words about love that transcended difference, about building bridges instead of walls, about choosing hope over fear. When it came time for vows, Piers spoke from his heart. "Kerra, you came into my life on a rainy morning and fixed more than just my roof. You fixed my heart. You showed me that love is stronger than hate, that kindness is braver than violence. I promise to stand by your side, to love you in sunshine and storm, to build a life with you that honors both our peoples. You are my home, my heart, my everything." Kerra's eyes shimmered with tears as she spoke her own vows. "Piers, you saw me when I thought I was invisible. You treated me with dignity when my own clan saw me as worthless. You risked everything to protect me, to love me, to give me a place to belong. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your love for all our days. Together, we will build something beautiful." They exchanged simple rings that Piers had made from silver wire, fitting them onto each other's fingers with trembling hands. And then Mara declared them bonded, and Piers kissed Kerra as the settlement erupted in cheers. The celebration that followed was joyous and long. There was music and dancing, food and drink, stories and laughter. Piers danced with Kerra, both of them clumsy but happy, and later danced with Kerra, who proved surprisingly spry for her age. As the night wore on and the stars wheeled overhead, Piers found himself standing at the edge of the meadow with Kerra, watching the celebration continue without them. "Happy?" Kerra asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," Piers said honestly. "When I woke up that morning to hammering on my roof, I never imagined it would lead to this." Kerra laughed. "And when I asked for nails, I never imagined the grumpy human would become my husband." "Bonded partner," Piers corrected with a smile. "Husband," Kerra insisted. "Partner, love of my life, all of the above." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their community celebrate. Kerra was teaching a group of children an old orcish dance. Paul and Zara were feeding each other cake. Mara was laughing at something one of the other settlers had said. This was their life now. Not hiding, not running, but living openly and fully. Building a future together in a place that celebrated their love instead of condemning it. "We should get back to the party," Kerra said eventually. "People will notice we are gone." "Let them notice," Piers said, pulling her closer. "I want to stay here a little longer. Just you and me and the stars." Kerra smiled and settled more comfortably against him. "Just you and me and the stars," she agreed. And that was how they stayed, wrapped in each other's arms as the celebration continued and the night grew soft around them. Tomorrow they would return to the rhythms of daily life, working in the gardens and workshops, building their home, being part of the community. But tonight was for wonder, for gratitude, for the simple joy of having found each other against all odds. Somewhere in the settlement, someone began playing a flute, the melody sweet and haunting. Kerra hummed along, and Piers closed his eyes, committing this moment to memory. The warmth of Kerra's body, the sound of distant laughter, the smell of spring flowers, the feeling of absolute rightness. He had woken to hammering on his leaking roof at sunrise, and an orc woman had waved down and asked for nails. It had been the beginning of everything. The start of a love that had transformed them both, that had led them here to haven, to safety, to home. "I love you," he whispered into Kerra's hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Always." And under the vast, star-filled sky, bonded and beloved, they stood together and dreamed of all the tomorrows they would share. The months that followed their bonding were some of the most peaceful and productive of Piers's life. He and Kerra settled fully into Haven, their cottage becoming a true home filled with small comforts and personal touches. Kerra decorated the walls with pressed flowers and woven hangings, while Piers built furniture that fit their space perfectly. A large bed that accommodated both their heights, shelves for Kerra's growing collection of herb jars, a table where they could share meals and conversation. Spring turned to summer, and the valley bloomed with abundance. The gardens Kerra tended produced more than expected, providing food for the entire settlement with plenty to preserve for winter. Piers worked on expanding the communal hall, adding a covered porch where people could gather even in bad weather. But more than the work, it was the community itself that enriched their lives. They formed deep friendships with Paul and Zara, often sharing meals and stories. Kerra stayed for several weeks before announcing she was returning to her forest retreat, but promised to visit regularly. The children of Haven, both human and orc, adopted Kerra as a favorite, following her around the gardens and begging for stories about her adventures. One evening in midsummer, as they sat on their own small porch watching the sunset, Kerra said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Piers asked, reaching over to take her hand. "About the future," Kerra said. "About what comes next. We have built such a good life here, better than I ever dreamed possible, but I find myself wanting more." Piers felt a flutter of anxiety. "More how?" Kerra turned to look at him, her expression soft and vulnerable in the fading light. "I want a family, Piers. I want children. With you." The statement hung in the air between them. Piers had not let himself think that far ahead, had been so focused on simply surviving and building a life that he had not considered the possibility of expanding it. But now that Kerra had said it, he realized he wanted it too. "Children," he repeated slowly. "Human and orc children. Is that even possible?" "Mara says yes," Kerra said. "There are already 2 mixed families in Haven. The children are healthy and beautiful, taking traits from both parents. It is rare, but it happens." Piers thought about it, imagining a child with Kerra's amber eyes and his dark hair, or his nose and her green skin. The image filled him with a warmth that was almost overwhelming. "I want that," he said finally. "I want to build a family with you, Kerra. To raise children who will never know the hatred we faced, who will grow up believing that love between different peoples is normal and good." Kerra's smile was brilliant. She leaned over and kissed him deeply, and when they pulled apart, both were grinning. "Then we will try," Kerra said. "And whatever happens, we will face it together." As summer faded into autumn, life in Haven continued its gentle rhythm. Piers and Kerra worked on their home, making small improvements and additions in anticipation of a possible future family. They built a small addition to their cottage that could serve as a nursery, though they told no one yet what it was for. The harvest that year was abundant, and the whole settlement came together to gather and preserve food for winter. It was hard work, but joyful, everyone contributing according to their abilities. Piers found himself working alongside people who had become not just neighbors but true friends, people who had walked similar difficult paths to find acceptance and peace. In late autumn, Kerra began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited several weeks to be sure, consulting with the settlement's healer, an orc woman named Shara who had trained in both human and orcish medicine. When Shara confirmed the pregnancy, Kerra came home glowing with happiness. Piers lifted her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. A child. They were going to have a child. The settlement celebrated with them, organizing a special meal in their honor. Kerra arrived the next day, as if summoned by some mystical grandmother sense, and immediately began fussing over Kerra and offering advice. Winter came gently that year, bringing snow but not the harsh cold Piers remembered from his isolated cottage. Here in the valley, surrounded by community, even the darkest months felt warm. Kerra's pregnancy progressed well, and Piers found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body, the way new life was growing within her. They spent the long winter evenings planning and dreaming. What would they name the child? How would they raise them? What stories would they tell? What traditions would they pass on? They blended human and orcish customs, creating something new that honored both their heritages. Spring came again, and with it, the time for Kerra to give birth. The labor was long and difficult, and Piers stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. Shara guided them through it with calm competence, and when the baby finally emerged, squalling and healthy, Piers felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "A daughter," Shara announced, cleaning the baby gently and placing her in Kerra's arms. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled, with soft green skin a few shades lighter than Kerra's, and a shock of dark hair. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a warm brown that matched Piers's own. She had small tusks barely visible in her tiny mouth, and pointed ears that lay flat against her head. "Hello, little one," Kerra whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting for you." Piers could not speak, could barely breathe. He reached out with one trembling finger and touched his daughter's tiny hand. She gripped his finger immediately, her hold surprisingly strong, and he felt something inside him shift and settle. This was what he had been fighting for, he realized. Not just the right to love Kerra, but the right to create this, a new generation that would never have to choose between different parts of their heritage, who would grow up knowing that love was bigger than fear. "What should we name her?" Kerra asked. They had discussed many names over the winter, but none of them felt quite right now that she was here. Piers looked at his daughter, this perfect blend of two worlds, and thought about the journey that had led to this moment. "Hope," he said softly. "I want to call her Hope." Kerra smiled through her tears. "Hope Jameson. It is perfect." Word of the birth spread quickly through the settlement, and soon their cottage was filled with visitors bringing gifts and congratulations. Kerra arrived and promptly burst into tears at the sight of her great-granddaughter, holding Hope with the practiced ease of someone who had cared for many babies. Paul and Zara brought a beautifully carved cradle. Mara organized meals to be delivered for the next 2 weeks, so Kerra could rest and recover. As Piers watched his community gather around his new family, he felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes. They had found more than just acceptance here. They had found belonging, purpose, love in its most expansive form. That night, after all the visitors had left and Kerra was sleeping with Hope nestled beside her, Piers stood at the window looking out at the settlement. Lights glowed in windows across Haven, each one representing a family, a love story that had overcome impossible odds. He thought back to that morning that felt like a lifetime ago, when he had been alone in a leaking cottage, angry at the world and nursing old wounds. He had woken to hammering on his roof, and an orc woman had waved down and asked for nails. Such a simple thing, that request. But it had changed everything. Kerra stirred in the bed behind him, and he turned to see her watching him with sleepy eyes. "Come to bed," she murmured. "Hope will wake soon, and we should rest while we can." Piers crossed to the bed and slid in carefully, wrapping his arm around both Kerra and their daughter. Kerra sighed contentedly and rested her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked softly, echoing the question she had asked on their bonding night. "I am complete," Piers said, and knew it was true. "I have everything I could ever want right here." "So do I," Kerra whispered. She kissed him gently. then settled back down, one hand resting protectively on Hope's tiny back. As Piers drifted towards sleep, he sent a silent thank you to whatever forces had guided Kerra to his roof that rainy morning. Thank you for the courage to let her stay. Thank you for Haven, for Kerra, for everyone who had helped them build this life. But most of all, thank you for love. For the kind of love that crossed boundaries, that built bridges, that created new possibilities. The kind of love that had given him Kerra, and now hope, and a future brighter than any he could have imagined. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their bonding, that had shone down on their journey through the mountains, that had watched over a lonely cottage where an orc woman once fixed a roof in the rain. And in their small cottage in Haven, surrounded by love and community, Piers Jameson and Kerra of the Stonefist clan slept peacefully with their daughter between them, safe and beloved, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The years passed gently in Haven, each season bringing its own rhythm and rewards. Hope grew from a tiny infant into a bright, curious toddler. She had Kerra's strength and Piers's thoughtfulness, moving through the world with confidence and kindness. The other children of Haven accepted her without question, playing together without any awareness of difference. She learned to speak both human common tongue and orcish, switching between them fluidly depending on who she was talking to. Piers watched his daughter grow with a sense of wonder that never faded. Every milestone, her first steps, her first words, her first time helping in the garden, filled him with pride. She called him Papa and Kerra Mama, and the sound of those words never failed to make his heart swell. When Hope was 3, Kerra became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a son they named Marcus, after Piers's friend who had died in the guard. Marcus had more of Piers's features, with lighter green skin and eyes that shifted between Kerra's amber and Piers's brown depending on the light. Their cottage, once a home for 2, and then 3, expanded to accommodate their growing family. Piers built a second story with help from Paul and other members of the community, creating bedrooms for the children and more space for their expanding life. Haven itself grew as well. More refugees arrived over the years, humans and orcs who had heard whispers of a place where they could be together without fear. Each new arrival brought skills and knowledge, strengthening the settlement. A proper school was established, teaching children of all backgrounds together. A trading post was built, allowing Haven to exchange goods with distant settlements that were willing to look past prejudice for quality products. Piers became one of the settlement's leaders, his carpentry skills and calm demeanor making him a natural person to turn to for advice and help. Kerra worked as one of the primary gardeners and also as a teacher, passing on her knowledge of plants and growing to the next generation. Together, they helped shape Haven into something that went beyond survival. It became a model of what the world could be if people chose understanding over hatred. Kerra remained a frequent visitor until she died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87. Her passing was mourned by the entire settlement, but celebrated too, as she had lived to see her great-grandchildren thriving in a world she had helped create. Hope, then 5 years old, placed flowers on her great-grandmother's grave and whispered a thank you for leading her parents to Haven. As Hope and Marcus grew older, they became advocates in their own way, writing letters to nearby human settlements, talking to travelers who passed through, showing by their very existence that human and orc could create something beautiful together. Some people listened, many did not. But slowly, incrementally, attitudes began to shift in the region around Haven. On Hope's 10th birthday, Piers stood with Kerra watching their daughter play with a group of mixed heritage children, all of them laughing and carefree in a way that would have been impossible a decade earlier. Do you ever think about that first morning? Kerra asked, slipping her hand into his. When I climbed on your roof. All the time, Piers admitted. I think about how close I came to driving you away, how different our lives would be if I had let fear win. But you did not, Kerra said softly. You chose to see me, to give me a chance, and it changed everything. Piers pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, herbs and earth and home. They had gray in their hair now, lines around their eyes. But the love between them had only deepened with time, growing roots as strong as the trees that surrounded Haven. I would choose you again, he said. Every single time, in every possible world. Kerra smiled and kissed him, gentle and sure. And I would choose you, always. They stood together watching their children play, their friends and neighbors moving through the settlement they had all built together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and somewhere a flute was playing, the melody sweet and full of promise. This was their legacy, Piers thought. Not just Hope and Marcus, though they were precious beyond measure, but Haven itself. Proof that different peoples could live together in peace, that love was stronger than prejudice. That the world could change one person, one choice, one act of kindness at a time. It had started with hammering on a leaking roof at sunrise, with an orc woman waving down and asking for nails. Such a small moment, so easily overlooked or dismissed, but small moments could change everything. A simple request could become a conversation. A conversation could become friendship. Friendship could become love. And love, true love that saw past surface differences to the person underneath, could transform the world. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Hope ran over to her parents, Marcus trailing behind her. Papa, Mama, can we have a bonfire tonight, please? Piers looked at Kerra, who nodded with a smile. A bonfire sounds perfect, he said. They gathered with the rest of Haven in the central square, piling wood high and lighting it as the night settled around them. Children roasted marshmallows and told stories. Adults shared news and plans. Music filled the air, a blend of human and orcish melodies that had become Haven's own unique sound. Piers sat with Kerra on one side, Hope and Marcus curled up against them, surrounded by community and bathed in firelight. This was happiness, he thought. This was peace. This was everything they had fought for, and more than he had ever dared dream. And when the fire burned low and the children grew sleepy, when they all began to drift back to their homes under the star-filled sky, Piers took one last moment to be grateful. Grateful for the rain that had driven Kerra to his barn. Grateful for her courage in asking for nails. Grateful for his own choice to say yes to tea, to companionship, to love. They walked home as a family, Hope on Piers's shoulders despite her protests that she was too old for such things, Marcus holding tight to Kerra's hand. Their cottage glowed with welcoming light, and Rosie nickered a greeting from the small stable they had built years ago. Inside, they settled the children into bed with stories and kisses. Then, Piers and Kerra retreated to their own room, to the bed they had shared for over a decade now, worn comfortable with love and time. "Thank you," Piers said as they lay in the darkness, their bodies curved together in the way they had learned fit perfectly. "For what?" Kerra asked. "For fixing my roof that morning, for asking for nails, for staying, for loving me, for all of this." He gestured at the room, the cottage, Haven, their entire life. Kerra laughed softly. "I should thank you, for giving me shelter, for seeing past my green skin and tusks, for building a life with me that I never thought possible." "We built it together," Piers said, "and we will keep building it. For Hope and Marcus, and for whoever comes next, we will keep showing the world what is possible when we choose love." "Together," Kerra agreed. She kissed him, tender and deep, and Piers felt the same flutter in his heart he had felt the first time their lips met in the barn all those years ago. Some things never changed. Some kinds of magic never faded. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and settled, while outside the stars wheeled overhead and the world spun on toward tomorrow. A tomorrow they would face together, building on the foundation of that first improbable meeting, that first simple request, that first brave choice to see each other as human and orc could be, equals, partners, and beloved. The hammering that woke Piers Jameson at sunrise so many years ago had not been an interruption of his life. It had been the beginning of everything that mattered. And as he drifted into sleep with Kerra's heartbeat steady beneath his ear, he sent one final thought of gratitude into the universe for that rainy morning, that leaking roof, and the orc woman who had waved down and asked for nails, changing both their lives forever.